Okay.
Losing one.
Yeah. So that would be display that's stimulating, like where you can actually get the response.
Yeah.
It's okay. No. You're really good.
I know.
Okay, yeah.
You want to go see the Q&A coming up?
I'm actually usually not there.
Okay.
Please bring back.
So I'm just going to
Okay.
go into...
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks again for being here. So I think what we're going to do now, we've got until 1 o'clock before we have some lunch. What I envisioned here was two sections, or two sections. First of all, the section going through any questions that you might have had around methodology and so on. Obviously, we're working with 5-6 partners here, and there's some non-methodological questions I thought would be appropriate for us to discuss those. And secondly was to think about what we need to refine here, add the context and so on. And we already started that question. I think it'd be great to go through that, recap some of it, and indeed talk about some of the things that we didn't necessarily go through. And then in the second section, I'd love to think about some of the implications for advertisers. What do we think, in terms of translating this into actionability, painful word though that might be? What are the things that we think are really powerful here? So why don't we start with, let's continue the conversation where we were before. What do we think we need to refine here? The one thing that I took away from our discussion earlier on was that there's a lot of great data here and some really, really important insights, but it may well be that we're lacking a little bit of a layer in terms of actionability. So I'd love to hear the context. I'd love to hear any ideas as to what that might be. One logistics point, let me just hand over to Dr. Ayo in the corner here.
All right, for everyone on the WebEx, you should see on the right-hand side, if you go into the Q&A tab, there's a participant called ARF Questions. And if you type your questions below and then send to ARF Questions, I'll be able to see it, and then I'll read it out loud to the group.
Perfect. Okay. So in terms of rethink, what's the one thing we need to do to this deck to make it most impactful? Who would like to start? Lauren, you and I had an interesting discussion earlier on.
Yeah, this actually started earlier. I think that one thing that we don't have data on are those companies that have never done TV. And I think this is important for them, but also it would change some of the results when it comes to digital, and where you might see that their penetration is going to be, and outcomes going to be much higher than what we see right here versus new and existing TV. I just think we don't have that data. But it'd be very interesting to figure that out. Those brands that are newer, that have not yet done TV. And I'm thinking about a lot of the gaming that's happening in mobile, where some of them are just starting to think about TV and its impact. I think it would be a really good nuance. It's not main, it's just a nuance.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I mean, I know that we have a lot of brands with not as large budgets as some of the other brands,
Mm-hmm.
and they're moving from more traditional and digital to digital only, to know what the synergy is between those two pieces.
And actually not limited to just newer brands, but there are established small brands that are trying to get the most out of the budget by saying, let's just do digital. See if there is any point of contrast to say 100% digital, what can we expect? How much greater would it be if you put it heavy? And if you split it by new and established, I think that would be a wonderful point of view to share.
Got it. Great.
Can I add one more?
Please.
Wrapping back on Dave's comment, which I thought was really great about being able to say something about improving advertising budgets in general. So a lot of the focus in those initial charts is if you have a budget, how do you allocate it between different medium?
Right.
Instead, can we also, and I actually totally understand why we went there, because that's easier to pull out from meta-analysis, same budget, what's the best allocation. But if you also take that same data source and say if we increase that budget 10%, 20% more, how does the ROI change? Because that's a point of view that we can go back and say, people were playing with 15 million, if it became 20 million, can you improve? If you have got 25 million, you go to 35, how much more? So
And
there
in
is,
the context, I think we have to focus on profit maximizing spend point, because your ROI is inevitably to go down when you're getting up there, but you're still driving profit.
yeah,
So I think, I honestly think it's actually not that hard to pull from our data sets. We just didn't frame the question.
yeah,
Leverage the total sales.
yeah,
Generally,
yeah.
that's the bigger picture. So maybe optimize on both. Or find
Yeah,
a
I
way
think
to
a lot of practical people don't understand the term profit optimization or max, but they do understand sales. So somehow
That's
you
the
can
bottom
say
line.
there's more sales that come from this.
And that's a strategic decision, whether or not you want to sacrifice one for the other.
So Jasper, one of the things I wonder if there's a way to dig a little bit more deeply into, and you sort of referenced it in the beginning. So if you think about television and national TV, we're going from, virtually no targeting, where, the penetration of the buyer and the buy is sort of the randomness of the population,
Right.
to, maybe we're at version, 2.0 of targeting using data sets like Bill has at TRA and others,
Yep.
to, the future being, addressable. And I wonder if there's a way to be able to parse out, when you look at ROI, how much of it is just, someone said it before, if you're not in the market, your advertising has no impact. Is there a way to sort of get ROI on an equivalized basis where you take into account the audience delivery? So you can understand, as TV gets better about eliminating waste, how much higher TV ROI potentially could raise up.
Got it.
And then I think the other thing, just from my perspective sitting here, would be, our world is very much around either building ad products or doing things in terms of native content, and to have this as a framework that could guide my product development, because I know if we deliver great native content, here's what it does to ROI, would be wonderful. And I don't know if there's a way to sort of parse that out, but as media companies, we're no longer just building programs and inserting ads. We're trying to do so much more on behalf of advertisers. It'd be good to sort of have some framework around that.
So would that be contextually relevant placements versus non?
That's one, potentially, programs with dramatically less commercial clutter. All things like that.
Ad load stuff, okay. And I know Bill Native is something which is very dear to your heart. It has been for some time, although masquerading under a different name before, right?
Well, yeah, True Sponsorship is what I had called it back in 2006, when the ARF Journal ran a meta-analysis of 28 studies that I had done with major advertisers, big brands that we all know, and they essentially used something like an ARS score, pretty similar methodology to that measure. And back then, the average ARS score was like a 4.3, and we were running at 3 times that for what we today call native, and sometimes much higher.
Great. One question I had, Christine, you were talking about the decomposition slide. I'm just wondering if we can dovetail that suggestion with the one you were bringing up a little bit earlier on, Dave, which is around the benefits of advertising per se. So it strikes me that, we're talking about adding context this day to make it most impactful, right? And that one context is, like, this exists within the context of, it's predicated on the notion that advertising is good. But maybe it behooves us to actually add that context, and I wonder if some kind of decomposition chart might even show it. Because, and Gail, building on what you were talking about taking the advertising budget and getting into the marketing budget, and then getting the overall budget. We're at least exist only at that first layer within that. So I wonder if we can include some stuff on that.
I think so. If we show profit maximizing or the sales maximization point, and then we also show at a couple maybe different given budget levels how you build the media plan, or you decouple the media plan up to that spend level.
Yep.
I think that might give some really good context maybe at the beginning of all of that.
Well, if I could piggyback on the beginning, I feel like, especially based on the conversation more so than on the deck, David gets credit for starting one of these. I think themes, you basically have three themes here that I think you could structure. One is, again, it wasn't in your presentation per se, but probably could be profitably added. The first one is, advertising just works, and charts that speak to the more advertising we do up to a point, the better we do. That's one. The second one is what your main presentation is about, which is allocation. And then the third one, I think, could actually take audience by surprise if you don't announce it in advance, and that's creative. Like everything was media, allocation. Then all of a sudden, and creative works really well too. So I think that probably should be set up.
Yeah, that's a logical. It's a very logical structure.
So a context of this might be constructive for the C-suite. The context is essentially, the base question is, advertising works. Is your advertising working? And do you know? All right. And do you know that you know that you've reached the threshold beyond which you should not spend money? Or do you know that question? Do you know you're at the point of diminishing returns? Do you know how effective your creative is? Do you know how creative relative, both in absolute terms and relative to your competitors? And do you know do you know that you have the right creative strategy across media? So it's a series of questions that are all contained in this research can inform all of these things. But I think the starting point is to put them all in the question, because the answer is I probably don't know any of these things.
And the answer can be, here's what we know, or here's what we've learned by each of those same areas. Because, we've been talking a lot about there's differences by category, so we know this, but it may be different for you, but here's the high level what we did know.
Yeah, you may have a basic understanding that your agency brought you 3 ads, and this one just did better than the other 2. But what about the people you're going to go out to do battle against? How's this ad stacked up to them?
And that raises I know we raise this question at every single meeting, and I apologize because but it raises the issue of what does the brand who's doing the advertising actually need to do strategically within the context of the category, within the context of the competitive set, because this is all interesting, and there may be applications, but the truth is if you're selling automobiles, you don't give a damn about what the personal product brand is doing. And I don't see any of that built in. The assumption is an assumption that this will work, and if I have TV and I add digital, I'll get something better. But I don't know whether or not strategically that works. And I don't mean to question your 3 elements, but an issue of saliency for most major brands, unless you're doing ad testing in terms of did I remember it? Every sentient being on earth knows Coca-Cola. So as measures of asking, as a measure of this is what I've attained, it flummoxes me, that people think that I'll buy Super Bowl and now I have more awareness. Look how much awareness I
Well, it does matter, no, maybe not for Coke, but if you're Dr. Pepper, whether you come up in the first three.
Maybe it does, but that doesn't show up anyplace here. Nothing is being built in to accommodate the fact that Dr. Pepper may in fact need that. You're absolutely right.
Well, you know, Bob, I really like the orientation of what is the brand trying to accomplish, what is the brand strategy first. And I think it gives more of a home for things that I was personally struggling with these chart after chart after chart. We've got low involvement categories, high involvement categories, which are a little open to interpretation. And we have, new and established, not open to interpretation except marketers' opportunity. So it's kind of taking each of those categorizations that we have floating through the deck and lining it up more to what is your brand strategy? Like, where's your brand now? Where do you think it to go? So that's helpful, really helpful.
And having that element, however you insert it, addresses the issue that you want to address, which is, it's not just advertising, it's marketing.
That's correct.
And where is the
Appreciate what you're doing.
the brand?
You can structure it just as simple as short-term, long-term. You had a couple slides in short-term, long-term. I mean, that's a very simple way. To your point, you can structure it as simple as a short-term strategy versus a long-term strategy, which you had a few slides in that. But that needs to be, what's the effective media mix, perhaps, or media channel that's going to drive sales versus drive brand awareness, or what's the best way to do that for a established brand versus a new brand?
And we freely admit that the media planning itself that the experts in this room do is not something that we do. But we look at the requirement of the brand. I mean, what I want is my brand to grow, however you define it. I mean, we call it emotional engagement, but whatever you want to call it. And I want them to make money. I want same-store sales to go up. I want, profitability we kind of put aside because way too much. No one's giving you access to all of the data you need to build that model. But sales, you ought to be able to track that easily enough. And that's what you want. And that's what you want to do.
Okay.
And now, you tell me where should I put the advertising? I think also, one other thing, I think also, Dave, to your point, there's an assumption these days that the advertising is great. Whatever shows up, it's like, that's fine. I mean, they're not doing the kinds of testing that were, apologize, 20, 25 years ago, to make sure that it was right, to make sure that it was strategically on. We just finished an assessment of 31 different Super Bowl commercials. I mean, you're down to about 38% of them that are effective.
And that's what
The rest of
our work says about a third of the ads that go into market are actually
The rest of them are entertaining. And that's okay, but then you've done this very short, very expensive movie and people move on.
I think our industry is trying to give them tools to be able to understand that faster in market, right? So we're trying to be able to tell them, if they haven't done all the pre-work ahead of time in market, which ads are working, which ads aren't working, cut the ads that aren't working, use the ads that are working. So I think it's a little bit of the industry also giving the marketers the tools to drop the ads.
Well, okay, I won't speak for that side of the table.
Whole side.
But we
And then these things are changing, like in terms of the like automotive category today, just in the press, there's this big issue with the millennial generation that they don't seem to have any interest in cars. And how does a company sell cars to millennials as an extension of their smartphone?
Yes.
Because that seems to be the one
technology and make it something more than transportation.
So is it a little bit of framing now for as what do we expect advertising to deliver? So it's short-term sales for sure, and I think a lot of the focus here was on that, but to the point, it's also building a stronger brand. And what does the different media do well for that? And I think to the point, it's also creating that engagement. So if you're in a high involvement category, why do we see TV plus digital performing so much well? Because there is an interaction going on. There is that TV casting the foundation to go and engage with the brand on the digital media. We're not teasing out that story, but that's really why you see that boost. And to the point that Joy had made earlier, some of the reasons why on the short-term ROI, you might see trade actually doing very well, but you won't see trade doing well if you didn't have advertising. So telling that story, I think a little bit more, pulling it out that advertising is actually not just about the short term. There are many of the other halo impacts that we need to focus on. I think maybe we won't have 100 case studies to pull out to pull that, but even if we have a few examples to pull that, I think it's still a buffer there.
Those to be contributed.
Yeah, I can help on some of them.
Right, I think that speaks though to the broader point of what, I like what you said, and I agree with that at a very high level. I'm concerned though that we shouldn't layer too much stuff in. Like the data you've got now, I believe, is like a real jewel in the crown that I have never seen before. Or, nobody has ever put together in one spot all of these mixtures of, okay, here, this much digital, this much mobile, this much TV. Don't lose that.
Right.
But, and so to the extent you can work in other stuff, okay. But like, I feel like a decent structure that we're kicking around would be, start with the idea advertising works. And then anything you could do that, hey, more advertising works better. But then within that, you could say, hey, and we have two big areas that we actually have a lot of data on. One is creative, and the other is media. And within creative, we're going to talk about optimizing through integrated versus not integrated, and so on. That's one. And then with media, we're going to talk about optimizing against allocation, because we have really empirical ground truth. We've got that. Have you seen that any place else? No. We have it right here. We're going to show you. This is not the be-all and end-all. It's starting the conversation. But I think like those are the really big buckets. If you can work in short-term, long-term, new versus established, you've got some of that. But like the big buckets are advertising works, and then under that, creative and media drive that advertising. And guess what? We actually have real data on both of those topics.
Yeah, it's certainly a logical structure, Mike. The point about brand strategy, I think, is also well taken around.
I agree. I would say work in as much as you can, but you might find that at the margin, some of these things you don't have as much data on as other things. You've got a ton of data on allocation. Some people might argue, hey, there's so many different brands out there, you don't have, but you do actually have more stuff on allocation of media than I've ever seen before. Right. And you've got good stuff on integrated, non-integrated, and whatever that third category was, integrated, customized. You've got that. Nobody's really kind of quite shown that. Right. And I think that at the margin, given that an audience is going to remember three big things or two, that is what I would communicate.
Thanks, Mike.
And then provide Gail's context and all that, then that packages up, I think, really well.
I think the one thing I think we want to be careful not to forget, actually Howard's comment is, I know the data we've provided here doesn't do this really well yet, so I'm not pitching for the next study, but I sort of am, is that the consumer at the center. We really, the way we deliver this and the way our work has been today is much more, here's the media you should lay on top. Right. We are moving our approach, everyone's moving the approach to now the addressable channels.
The ability to do that.
We're going to change, this is the state change model, right? So it's more about where is the consumer at the moment and what do I say to them given their state. They're at the lower funnel. They need the promo message now because they're shopping. This other consumer that's just considered minivans for the first time in their life needs to actually get a different message. So this, like the state change, the consumer level, I don't think we've given you great data to actually address it yet, but I feel like we've got to have it in here somewhere to give it the we're not forgetting about it, we just don't have the tools quite yet to do it perfectly, or something like that. Maybe it's the footnote at the end or something that we know it's changing, and we know these answers will change as addressability proliferates.
Got it.
So from the increased investment angle, I really like the chart where you called out the category leaders or the share of the
Yeah,
categories.
there's
That
some
might
others
be
there, right?
one opportunity that you look at, right? And experiment with optimizing, or what if you had an additional $10 million, or plus 25% heavy up, plus 50%, plus 100%, where do you see the diminishing return? How do you get there? Maybe use a hypothetical example. But there is definitely opportunities.
Great, thanks, Jeff. How do you feel about the audience section? You know, we looked at first of all, we looked at from a demographic perspective, from an age perspective specifically, then we looked at households, and then we pivoted and looked at new versus retained. And then finally, we looked at the purchaser targeting from TiVo. Does that tick all your boxes in terms of audiences? Do you think that there are other data that we need to either provide context or to make it more actionable there?
Jasper, I'll make a comment here. I think that's a very TV-centric view of the world. From the digital point of view, I mean, with addressability, we can actually start to address individuals. So I think, like Howard was saying, TV's moving in that direction, right? In a few years, it would have that kind of programmatic, addressable capability. So, demographics might actually become less and less relevant. And what Christine was saying earlier, where they are in their stage of the funnel, right? If they're not aware, they need to make them aware. If they're aware, but they need more information before they can make a decision, so that means they're in consideration, what are the things we give to them, and what are the right channels we use to get it to them? And then furthermore, when they make the purchase, then do they become advocates and tell other people through social channels?
Yep.
So then the stage of their journey becomes a very important way of slicing the data, more so than just the demographics, because that was useful for TV and finding your audiences. But as we get to audiences of one, then that the emphasis shifts.
Got it.
There's one other angle on audiences that is worth mentioning. I think of the state within a product category or brand as a product-specific psychographic phenomenology. But then underneath that, each human being has an innate psychographic, which is also changing over time. And we haven't seen much use of psychographics in recent years, but I'm working on it right now. So just to report what might be possible in the second quarter, maybe, is Timothy Joyce. I don't know how many of the people in the room remember Timothy, but when he was alive, he and I did some work together where we started with every word in the unabridged Oxford Dictionary that could have a psychographic aspect to it. So there are over 10,000 words. And then using factor analysis and national samples and people self-scaling themselves, we boiled it down, and I came away, and in the MRI you'll see there's a 20-question psychographic questionnaire which came out of this. But I pulled them off 1,562 of these words, and then in 1997 tested them with set-top box data with a recommender in TCI, a couple of TCI cable systems. And what we saw was that if what you care about is, did somebody become a loyal viewer of the show as a result of a recommendation, which of these 1,500 words survived that criterion and were predictive of the change to become a loyal viewer? So there's 261 of them. We call them driver tags. We've licensed them into my new startup, RMT. And we're doing various things with them. And right now, we're in the process of hopefully connecting them to a large set of set-top box and cross-media and purchase data, which kind of, it's TiVo research, of course. So if that happens and we get there, then we'll have a lot more information about the innate psychographics of the person in the audience.
So, this whole thing about the audiences and targeting it, and I didn't hear a presentation on this where the question was, whom do you not want to reach, right? And addressability and targeting sounds fine, but let's be honest, we have really bad data with the idea that you can precisely determine who it is that's in the market for a certain product and just target them is a great conceptual idea. Most of the time, most of the tools we have to do that are totally unable to deliver it. If you looked at, so you talk about like television has been based on demographics, and it's been 18 to 49 and 25 to 54. If you eliminated all of the sales effect that came out of the television campaign from the people who were not in those demographics during it. So if your demographic target was 18 to 49, and you said, okay, I'm going to eliminate all the sales I got from people 50 plus when I ran that campaign, you would never have a positive ROI. Everything would fail. So we have to be careful that we're not. You have to understand you want to know as much as you can about people, but you don't want to start to say that this person has no value based on any criteria.
Jack Hill had a theory about
Target this as a grayscale.
and then you can give people a weight based on how good a target they might be, their potential to be convinced by what you're now running.
So, Jasper, I think what might be newsworthy about this comes back to the discussion about reach and frequency. And I think we were even talking about it. So what is the value of using, and it gets back to the media allocation, is knowing what the brand strategy is, whether it's reach or frequency, how am I leveraging that to reach the audiences that I need to reach in an effective way so that I'm maximizing my top line and bottom line? Because I'm thinking back about the conversation we were having. So is it still 3+ frequency? Is it 5+? Is it 10? What does 51 exposures mean? I think if we can help advertisers come up with a better roadmap to, okay, so how frequent do I need to be and what are my best vehicles in order to get there? I think that's really actionable for people.
Well, so just to that point, I suggested it to Jasper during the break. I was taken by that chart with the we used to call wear out. We must have TV. We must have TV data on that. I mean, I know it was a big deal during the 70s.
Yeah, there's
Why not see whether or not it isn't just an issue of they're millennials or they're boomers, but whether or not it's a physiological state in terms of visual literacy and message communication.
Well, I mean, I think the how and why is interesting. What I sparked to about what Chris just said is giving people a now what action steps should we take? And I had the opportunity to interview Howard and Steve Hasker last Friday as part of this whole CES interview series because they were too busy at CES. And one of the comments that was made there, which just is so simple, but it really sparked and it fits this pretty perfectly, is if you're buying digital spending, add a flight of television. Period. Right? So if you can go to marketers kind of on that and just do it, it's just so simple. It just says, and that reprises a lot of the discussion before the break, which is like, don't be ridiculous. Do not be out there buying a bunch of digital television, digital if you're not already having some television, which is the point that you made right before the break, David.
Well, well, the piece that's currently in field for you for the different categories, then we're capturing how they've allowed themselves to be exposed. So even though you'll be able to see in-market effects of whether they were just digital, or they were just TV, or they were both.
So Jasper, just coming back to the point of the question about demos, I mean, the 18 to 34 data that Christine has on her computer, I mean, I think we were all surprised at that. Is there a way to, the fact that it was not dramatically different, and I wonder, is there a way to pare that back a little bit to make it a little bit more millennial, digital-centric, just so you see one potential extreme that I think everybody believes is out in the market to some extent.
Like an 18 to 24.
Yeah, no TV in the home, that sort of thing.
Still at home with their parents, actually. The 18 to 24 group, that's at the very low end. You would expect to see larger than here. Here there's
TV lower,
20.
digital video higher.
Right. Well, on that very chart, I think what would help me, and I assume some others, is those charts you showed that are also similar, those are optimized charts,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so what about also starting us off, again, context building? Well, what's actually there? Like, what are people actually doing? So marketing
we have-
can say, no. The optimized is
We have-
this, and you guys are over there.
We have
But I think
current-
the actual start, some kind of current would, I think.
Yeah,
be
we
useful.
we do have that for where all of our database started. So we could show you the change, and then we could show you the incremental upside in these optimized.
I mean, to that point, I really do, you want some feedback on your audience stuff specifically. I thought that was valuable. I don't remember if you had indexes in there, but like, you basically showed, hey, if, you got the younger millennials with kids, this works, you got the older people, this works. I didn't get a sense if it was a 130 or a 120, but I do think that stuff's relevant if the index is relevant, because, again, it speaks to marketers who are maybe moving too much into digital direction, possibly, to say, hey, this combination still works for older people. Then you have other data, like the optimized spend,
Right.
that says, well, even if you're younger people, the optimized spend still has a lot in there for TV.
Right.
So I did personally find the audience stuff valuable.
Good.
And I agree with that. I think it may not be possible in this round, but one of the future initiatives might be if we can go into segments like ethnicity, because that's always something that comes up. We want a Hispanic marketing program. How does all these things change if we go there? And now you start hearing a lot more about Asian marketing things as well, and nobody has a clue how to answer that. I think we'll have that.
That's all about it.
Yeah. So, and again, we don't want to put too much into this, that we lose the focus of the story. So some of it can be initiatives that are going to come up later. But I thought that everything that you had was nuggets that people didn't know. I did struggle with the new versus, no, not the new, the retail, the new customers versus the retail. In definition terms, not that the finding was confusing to me, because when you're talking about CPG, how are you looking at your feed? Are these people? Yeah, so something about, like, in my mind, I was trying to say, well, what does it really mean if I'm a Coke or a Pepsi? Because are these people who didn't try in the last 3 months? Are these people who never tried it? So some clarity around that. It makes total sense when you're looking at the other categories where you know what a new is and what is a repeat. But for some of the others, I struggle a bit there. But I have to still run with what you have, because it's better than nothing.
It's year on year, right?
Yes.
It's in the users.
That was
Go ahead. The timing issue is the big one, because a lot of, I've seen a lot of presentations made to marketers where they have a campaign, and the campaign is like a 13-week campaign, and the frequency that they show is just, and the reach and frequency shown is just the 13-week reach and frequency, and this is a product where people in the market every single week. So really, is it relevant that you reached 70% of the marketplace over 13 weeks when you reached only 30% during the average week where people were purchasing the product? That is exactly when are you reaching people and how is that relating to their actual activity, consumption activity. And that's, I think, where a lot of marketers, a lot of companies have fooled themselves because they have reduced the weekly reach by going into cheaper and cheaper inventory, more and more volume. You reduce the weekly reach, but by the time you get through 13 weeks, you're still back up there at 70 plus, and they feel fairly comfortable about that. You used to reach over 50% a week, and now you're reaching 33% of people a week.
With less frequency relative to Bill's point.
I think we probably have some data we could complement that ComScore data with. For TV, we were talking about, it's a word we don't use outside of our company because it's complicated, but it's essentially a date-weighted effective frequency. So it's what is your still effective frequency in the market in any given week? I've blown up some people's heads trying to explain it. So I think we're getting to a clear way to talk about it. But I think we can show some of that data.
Right. I mean, Mike, you raised the point earlier on that a lot of this will fit into existing theories of advertising, which is great to hear.
It
Also, this
does.
is all about recency, right?
Well, I think one that nobody's mentioned yet that I want to be really explicit about that is empirical and that you had on your chart again, and that was the How Advertising Works study from IRI 1991.
Yeah.
That speaks to retention, and I think you should really make clear is it's obvious that more reach, is generally good. And I know from modeling work that I've done that increasing reach has a linear effect between, say, 20% reach and maybe 85 or 90 after that diminishing return. So that's cool. But the frequency, I think frequency in our industry is not really getting enough play. And in How Advertising Works, number one, it said, and this again speaks to retention, it said that to grow your brand, you can do it based in two ways, right? And they both apply. One is to get more people, and then the other is through retention, to get, not just to retain them, but to get them to buy more. Like they used to buy 1.05, and now they're buying 1.15 because of this wonderfully integrated, customized campaign, right? Put some things together. So now they're doing it, whatever it is that they're doing. And so I think somehow, if you could work that back in, like I think we are getting the trial part and the people part. We're not getting their actual behavior in the sense that if they buy more, that's just as good. If they buy 15% more, and you got the same people and you're retaining them per your chart, that's almost as good as getting 15% more people because of the linearity.
Well, Bill's work on Bill's concept of the heavy swing purchase, which shows that there are the other people who have a consideration set of 3 or 4 brands, and they go back and forth between those brands, and that actually, it's that group that is most affected by advertising.
Bingo.
Excellent. Switching gears now, revisiting the creative section. We talked a second ago about setting the context in terms of what marketers are doing, what a typical campaign looks like in terms of media allocation. One piece that strikes me that might be useful would be we kind of alluded to this in our discussion, is what do campaigns typically look like? How many advertisers over the last year have done non-integrated versus integrated, same creative, integrated, custom creative? So that's one idea I had. Any other thoughts on how we might build out that creative section? Was there pieces for the advertisers in the room that you felt were still unanswered questions from that section? Or for anyone else for that matter?
Well, I think we had the opportunity, two comments, I think we had the opportunity to bridge that section with the neuroscience section.
Right, I was going to say that's a perfect segue into the neuroscience, because I think what we have is, we make the point that creative is 2/3 to media being 1/3, we say so. Maybe you should pay more attention to creative. And the good news is that we have some really great new tools to help you do that. That we can now, you should be employing those tools.
Yeah, but maybe we're not saying enough to set that up. I mean, Dave, you brought up a couple examples of all the research that's been done showing the importance of creative relative to media and how much more important it is that the focus isn't there, but reminding people that this is not just a one-shot learning we have, there's always been learning showing how important creative is, and we're not paying enough attention to it. We're more worried about optimizing the media piece of it, which isn't going to give you as much return. Is that
So
set up?
structurally, does that suggest that, again, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed here with good stuff, but does that suggest maybe you actually, so consider this, separate the creative presentation from this one? I mean, I don't know what you were planning to do, but, you've got a data set chock full of stuff that people have never seen before. Audiences, optimizations, actualities, and so on. Could that presentation, if you have time, stand by itself, and then have a separate one on creative learning, maybe linked to the neuro stuff, as opposed to putting creative...
Well, that's really ground truth. That's the other ground truth thing. So that's a transition of what we've done here into the ground truth.
Well, I think that's what I'm asking. Does the creative...
Kind of bolted it on. We had trouble yesterday when we had it laid out, or 2 days ago, figuring out where it went, because you have it up front, but it's like the order in which you do it in, right?
Yeah.
Versus what evaluating it and where it belongs. I want to make sure, though, I think it's artificial to separate out creative from the actual the effectiveness of digital, especially digital spending. And, Mike, this will be somewhat dated. I understand your comments, Bob, about copy testing and people spending a lot of money on it. I was, guilty as charged, a lot of money on it. The shares, and we did some of our own, quite a bit of our own. The shares never lined up with market share, ever. Until Nielsen came along with brand effects, which they kept changing the name of, which just made me crazy. Even though we're in the Nielsen board, because it's very, it actually lines up to market share. But I think that this whole area of how you
when they get a lot of purchases in that business.
Yeah. But the question really is, how do you evaluate your creative effectively in today's marketplace? And from the standpoint of the RF, we have organizations, some up here, Mesh Consulting, of course, you have the work that you're doing, Robert. I mean, I'm seeing, more exciting things in some of these new organizations in terms of the way they're evaluating what our agency would call emotional advertising versus product attributes-based advertising, because those were the two sides, right? And the agency would always be, that's why I love neuroscience. The agency which is a kickoff to this afternoon, so I just saved you half an hour. Because the agency would always say, well, you can't measure emotion using these copy tests where you're having them like allocate chips across brownie mixes or whatever. And so that whole opportunity to figure out how to get at the hearts and minds and the heartbeat of the consumer to build loyalty and build brands, I think it's a big opportunity. From my chair leading the RF, I feel we have to keep those conversations together. We'll try to work the awkwardness of and the 9th chapter of, a 42-chapter book, and because I understand exactly what you're saying.
But that's what I'm asking you. Do you think, I actually like the idea of exactly as this was presented, but as it's unfolded and generated a ton of conversation, it feels like the creative stands out separately from the allocation. I just wonder if just psychologically, the creative and all the media stuff can really psychologically fit into one presentation.
Well, we have to figure that out. What happens is, David teed this up, but basically, ground truth number one is how do you spend it's a C-suite. How do I spend my marketing dollar across? How do I spend my marketing dollar and my advertising dollar in the context of marketing? And if I have another dollar to spend, where should I spend it, right? So it's the discernment of the next dollar. Then it basically says, well, okay, once you've decided where you should be spending dollars in today's marketplace, which is the big allocation question, like it's kind of a big A, not the right at the fine-tuned point. Then basically, how do you make sure that dollar it maximizes the impact to sales, which is all about creating great creative. And then ground truth number two gets at priming effects. Order, should social media come before television? Should print come before television? It gets at order effects, priming effects, and then it gets at what was teed up on targeting. It gets at digital natives versus non-digital natives. So it gets at literally using neuroscience, whether consumers process differently. So it kind of takes it, I mean, I'm really thrilled with this work that the team has done, because it takes it from these kind of flat traditional decisions, which is great to set the context, and then it goes into straight into neuroscience.
To connect a
Right
point,
into chapters, but.
I think a point that David was making about you it's a combination of programmatic experiences and ultimately, like, you do still, there's probably not anybody you don't want to reach. I think what this is connecting is what is actually using programmatic or addressable to deliver the right message to the right person. You still might need to deliver to all 90% of this population, but the tools are actually giving you the ability to deliver something else to each one.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we use all the new biofeedback things. You're running promos for a television program, and there's two different appeals to the television program. One's a serialized Sophie appeal, and the other one is a thinking person's procedural appeal. And one of them will turn on one audience, one of them will turn on another audience. But if you don't do it right, they'll also turn off audiences. So you can actually end up neutralizing yourself if you try to do it all at once. So what we did is try to figure out how we could get the message that the person got the message that we wanted them to get, and we didn't hear the other message. We didn't care that they, and that's very difficult to do. It's not an easy thing to do. And when I tell people about the difference between when you're promoting television programs or you're promoting movies, sending for movies, the bottom effect is not zero. The bottom effect is negative. You can actually, your ads can convince people this is definitely something I do not want to see. And so those are the types of nuances you got to get with the application of the more sophisticated techniques we have now.
I see a possibility here to make the two parts of ground truth, the ROI part and the neuro part, fit together. If we were to categorize creative into, for example, 3 big buckets: rational, emotional, and native, where I define native as there's an identification that the brain brought you this content, but it's also, the content is positioned as either information or entertainment or both, but it's not a sales pitch. Whereas both rational and emotional are still sales pitches, they're commercials. And even if native were to appear in a pod, if a 30-second piece of native TV were to appear in a pod alongside these other messages, it would still clearly be native. And I would take all cause marketing messages as being part of native. And then, so if you had that 3-way taxonomy, we'd be able to see the ROI by those rolling up those creative executions. We'd also be able to maybe dig more deeply into the neural underpinnings of why emotive works and how it works differently from rational. Different parts of the brain are going to be involved. Native, the way it works is clearly by a completely different route than advertising, where it's not so much the features of the brand that are attracting you, or the personality of the brand that's attracting you, but rather the degree of trust you feel for the people who make that product. So we know that trust lights up different parts of the brain than other emotions do. My hypothesis would be that we'd see native works because of the increase in trust, and we could verify that neurologically.
So what does work? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say real quick, there's some work that Nielsen did because they brought in Robert Heath as part of their Nielsen brand effect, and they get some information on survey based about emotive and non-emotive. And they were trying to do some correlation with the neurometrics that wouldn't touch into the native, but that would touch into the other part. I don't know how advanced they are, but I would look into that data to include it into GTE too.
they collect so much data, it would be great to do a roll-up of the brand effect stuff. They have it.
Randall? I imagine, I mean,
Yeah, they were looking at correlations. It didn't line up perfectly, and as far as I know, there wasn't a very clear insight, but I'm sure they've gone a long way ever since.
I know in keeping with you, this creative that works and creative that doesn't work. I'm looking at this entire presentation, and as this material is presented at Rethink, and it's, once again, I'm saying to myself, but we just went through this presentation, and very, very informed people who really know this stuff, and we spent the time interpreting every single slide, right? And we had different perspectives, and we were asking questions of each other. Right? So I think one of the things that we should try to address is when we're ready to get in front of the audience, I think we should, whatever we're going to do, we should show it to a couple of CMOs and a couple of reporters from two major ad agencies. Just show it to them and say, man, how do you interpret this? Because I have a feeling, they could really screw this up. I mean, they could have a totally different perception than what we want. So I think we should test our own creative on them.
That's a great idea. I love it. Really good.
that's a fabulous idea, and just to be clear, which I know the team understands, it won't be this presentation that we
No, I didn't say all feedback.
We intended to set it up.
Whatever presentation we end up with.
And one of the things, I love the idea of test driving it with a couple of execs, and, you all. But I think the other really key thing that we figured out pretty quickly as we were putting the program together is we have the program set up where we have two pieces to this. We have, a main stage, ta-da, but then we have kind of interactive networking workshop component. And ideally, we're going to figure out, and Augustine's going to figure out how we get social media set up so we have the conversation starting before we get there with whatever group of people either opt in or we choose in, because that's part of the value of getting a conference ticket and getting one ahead of time. And then we continue the conversation afterwards. So, I still aim to get back the momentum and the enthusiasm that the councils had at the ARF. And those were, it's clear to me the feedback I've gotten from many of you in this room, but so many that aren't here, you wouldn't miss a council meeting or you missed out. And, this conversation today could be construed that way, but we need to create lots more like that to create the kind of change.
And one of the, in that regard, one of the people that I think you should present it to in advance of the conference is Mr. Fowler from Trade-Off. You're creative speaker from July. Yes.
Yeah, we test drove some of it with him yesterday. We earned the right to have him actually agree to speak after he agreed to speak yesterday, based on what we talked about, the politics of keynote speakers. Yes, that's a very good suggestion.
Fantastic. Great discussion. Thank you so much. This will make the Rethink presentation so much more valuable. Hugely appreciate your time this morning. I don't know if lunch has arrived just yet, but when we have, let's go and you must all be starving, because I certainly know. Let's go and have some lunch. Thank you very much again.
And do you want to make an announcement for those on the phone? For the
Okay. When are we coming back?
1:30 for the ground truth experiment.
Okay. There were no questions from the webcast. All right. We're going to regroup at 1:30. Thank you.
Yes, but which day of the week would you be showing this? That would it be day 1 and day 3? And then you say
February something. I'll get the exact date. I think it's like the 22nd.